Welcome to Thinking Deeply About Primary Education, the podcast that makes time and space to think about pedagogy, teaching and learning, professional development, anything of interest to time poor but enthusiasm rich primary teachers. This week, I can't wait to share another fascinating interview with you featuring teacher and PhD candidate Juan Fernandez. During our chat, we discuss why evidence informed practice is important, how to find the time to engage with education research, why some edu myths will outlive us all, and much, much more. Whether you're new to the profession or an experienced senior leader, you won't want to miss this one. Before we begin, I want to say a massive thank you to everyone who listens every week and to those who support the podcast on KoFi. It really is appreciated, so on behalf of everyone involved in TDaPE, thank you. And that's enough for me. Without further ado, let's spend some time thinking deeply about primary education. So this week, I'm delighted to be joined by Juan Fernandez. It's great to have you here, Juan. How are you?
Fine. Thank you very much, Kieran. It's a pleasure to be here with you and your listeners and viewers.
It's great to have you here. Now, we always begin with our guests in numbers, to get a feel for who they are. And so my first question to you is years as a teacher.
12.
First year group taught?
It's K7, I think. It's 12 years old. For us, it's first of ESO. It's like the first year of secondary school.
Last year group taught?
Third of ESO, which is K9.
Most important year group?
For me, it's K12 when we prepare them for the university. Yes.
Favorite year group?
It's also my favorite.
Blog posts?
159.
Blog hits?
It's almost 400,000 readers now, and we are now at more or less 15,000 each month.
That's amazing. I mean, I take your blog posts and put them into an app that lets me identify words that I don't know. So I will every morning be reading one of your posts. The most recent one was about cognitive load, I think, was maybe.
Yes. Yeah, I'm preparing a special about cognitive load. So I'm taking the educational psychologist special issue, I think for 2010. I don't know. I don't remember the year. And I'm preparing some posts about that especially because for me cognitive load is very, very, very important.
Yeah, I mean, on a personal note, it's really because I understand the English sources. I can then use that to fill the gaps in my vocabulary when I understand what that means now. That's fantastic, and we're definitely going to get to that as we go through the interview.
Learning Spanish with educational psychology. It should be like a special degree.
Yeah, it's certainly a very niche group. I'm not sure how many of us are. So you're a secondary teacher, avid reader and blogger, PhD candidate in psychology, the author of Educar in La Complejidad, which I think translates the complexity of educating, from what I can make.
Yes, or complexity of teaching. I don't know, because educating, I don't know if it has the same meaning.
La evaluación formativa, formative assessment. Yeah. Tell us about your journey and how you got here.
I think my journey started at the university. I studied biology. So I used to read papers and scientific journals. I participated in some scientific congress. I worked in the Royal Botanic Garden in Madrid. So there, sharing scientific information was really important because I think in science, we all work that way. So my English really improved there. It has to improve more, but I got used to read in English because science was written in English. But then with the crisis in 2008, everything changed. So I decided to go to move to teaching, which I like because I was a particular teacher. And I also work in teaching programs in the Royal Botanic Garden. So when I started teaching, I was amazed, but by how little scientific information was put into practice. and how CPDs were more like magic. So we go there, the audience saw some kind of magician performing magical tricks. So, and I really couldn't know how to do it in my classroom. So it was like all, I don't know, like a kind of vacuum, like ethereal, like air. So I decided to start reading about teaching and learning from a scientific point of view. And from that, I discovered that I was better as a teacher. So that readings were making me better teacher. So that was great. But the problem was that many teachers in Spain don't have access to that scientific readings because they are in English. So I decided to translate them to Spanish. And that is how I got here. I started a blog that at the beginning was very, very small and few people read it, really. But it has grown and grown bigger and bigger with more entries and different kind of journals, because I started with books, but then I decided to include scientific papers that for me are really important, like the base, because the books that I read were based on scientific papers. So I was like a bridge between the scientific community, then people who was writing books based on that scientific papers, and that was me. So too many steps. it was like a children play. And I decided to translate directly the scientific papers. So now I am more focused on scientific papers than popular books, although I continue to bring them to the blog.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And completely by accident, you're the second biologist that's taken part in this season. We've someone from who's teaching in Dusseldorf, and he was talking to me about the impact of stress. And essentially, he's taken his scientific background and looked at how stress can impact in the classroom. Do you reckon your foundation in science has made it a lot easier for you to sort of perform the role that you perform now?
Yes, because we are used to, before starting an experiment, or for me, before starting to grow plants, for example, we need to read a lot. So reading was part of our job. So to improve as a gardener, or to improve as a scientific, in my case, about nature conservation, reading was a very basic skill. So we can't live without reading, without knowing what other people is doing all around the world in other centers. In my case, other botanic gardens. So yeah, I think we are trying to, I don't know, to spread this kind of work in Spain, because I think in the UK it's more common, I think.
Yeah, I get you. I mean, it's been about 10 years of quite consistent sort of snowballing. You know, it started with a few people, maybe around the turn of the decade or the last decade. And then bit by bit, more teachers sort of get into that snowball. And you've got things like research ed that are sort of sharing the work of people, you know. So I think you're right.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to do. And few people, we are trying to do this here in Spain. We are inspired by what happened in the last decade in the UK.
Fantastic. I mean, and it almost feeds into my next question. Why is an evidence-informed or research-guided approach essential in our schools?
Because teaching is something that is very personal. It's something like, it's kind of a symbolic relationship. So usually we talked about the differences with doctors and medicine, but I prefer talking about architecture, because in architecture, the goals, the aims could be different. So we are doing, for example, a house to live, or maybe we are building a university, or we are building a hospital. So buildings are very, very different. And the same thing happens in teaching. We could have different types of a school with different, very, very different type of children with a social background and everything. But to build something, we need to know how, for example, concrete works. So the physical properties of materials, and the physical laws, for example, gravity, are important. So when we think about teaching, we need to know like the basic cognitive architecture of human brain. That is not to say that every people is the same, but brains work more or less the same way. This is something that strikes many people here in Spain, that no, because everyone is different. Yeah, everyone is different, but marketing, or I don't know, the advertisements work because we are more or less, our feelings are driven by the same things, for example. So we can build on that scientific knowledge, knowing the properties of learning, basic on cognitive psychology, and translate that to the buildings that we each one have in our classrooms. So our classrooms are different, our students are different, but the basic workings of our brains are more or less the same. So we can build on that. And we have several teaching methods and CPDs that are not based on that are the opposite of that. And they build on something that, like general skills or things that we know that they are not true. So when we base our foundations are wrong, the building will collapse for sure. So for me, it's important to know the foundations of the material in our classrooms that are the cognition of our students.
Yeah, I'm totally with you. I mean, it gets quite a bit of kickback sometimes on social media, but obviously Dylan William will say we have more in common than that which separates us. And I think you're totally right. You can base sort of evidence-informed pedagogy on some general principles, and then be reactive or responsive in the moment when those differences do present themselves.
Yes, because sometimes it seems like we are proposing one way to teach everyone, but that's not true. That's not true. We are proposing knowing how the brain learns, so how everyone's brain is learning, to create a different type of teaching adapted to our students, because I don't teach the same way if I am at the first hour in the morning or late in the evening. So yeah, we talked about the summer in Spain, which is horrible because it's like 40 degrees. It's not the same teaching in Christmas when everyone is like hoping, willing to get into the holidays, than, for example, in the end of May when we are tired at the end of the course. So yeah, Graham Nuthall said that the teaching was adaptation. Yeah, it's true, but it's not so relative that we can't get like general rules that apply for everyone.
Whenever I ask guests about research, I often ask them about their research Thunderbolt. And to give a bit of context, in The Godfather, when Michael Corleone goes to the Italian island when he's hiding, he meets his wife and he's struck by this thunderbolt and he realizes this is the woman he needs to spend the rest of his life with. And sometimes people have a paper that the scales fall from, the evidence informed, this is how rigorous it can be. What was your Thunderbolt?
Yeah, I have one. Mine was Danlowski et al. In 2013. I think the name is Improving the Students' Learning with Effective Learning Techniques or something like that, because it's very long. And it was like very big research into the most common strategies for learning. They said that, for example, rereading is very ineffective, which was, I was like this, and elaborative questioning was very effective. And when I read that, I realized that reading those papers could make me a better teacher. So for me, that paper was a very high point.
Yeah, because I mean that's a massive thing, because I reckon most people listening, when they studied at university, they reread and reread and reread.
Yeah. I totally did that.
Yeah, and I never liked doing tests, and now I understand why I didn't like doing tests, because I wasn't helping myself. 7 days, okay, this information is going to be here, but 2 months later, no way. That makes a whole lot of sense. I mean, probably one of the most important things that we've sort of realized as a profession recently.
Yeah, for example, highlighting. They say that highlighting is not very effective, but I keep on highlighting because I like to I read the books and then write in notebooks like this. So yeah, I keep on highlighting. So that's an example of what we talked. We have the strategies, but we need to adapt the strategies to our reality.
Yeah. How many colors do you use when you're highlighting?
No, one.
Just one?
Oh, one. Yes, it's only one.
Yeah,
I hate highlighting in 10 colors. It's like a rainbow, but the cognitive load.
yeah, absolutely.
Too
Yeah,
much for my working memory.
I've definitely spoken to people with systems, maybe 5 colors, and they'll have a reason. But if I ever try that, I forget what the colors mean, or the ink runs out. How do you find time to engage with research? I mean, perhaps most importantly, when you weren't studying for your PhD and you were, because obviously now it's almost mandated, you need to read to fulfill the requirements of the course. But when you're teaching secondary, what was your process for finding the time?
Yeah, I read at nights. I read during the nights. It's difficult sometimes because they are not very accessible. The language it's not the same language that we use. So I think it's all about practicing. So you start reading and you understand like 10%, and then you keep on reading and you understand more and more and more. So one clue and one thing that helps me a lot is try to read even if you don't understand, because maybe in the future it will click, and then that was what I read like a few months ago. And for me, it's also helpful to read something that is related to the problems that I'm having in my classroom. So I think it's a kind of intrinsic motivation. So I read something, and then few days later, I see something that was related to the paper that I read. So I think, what is the relationship between this is what happens now here with this person and the thing that I read a few days ago. So that keeps me reading. But sometimes I spend a lot of time without reading, and it's difficult to hang on again. I don't know how to say, but I think it's something that it's like a habit. If you read quite a bit every day, it's easier that you read like 5 papers and then you spend a month without reading, because when you try to continue, you forget.
Yeah, I mean, it must be really difficult because we often talk on the podcast about how the language is sometimes chosen to obstruct the reader. And if you're coming at it from a non-native background, that must be twice as difficult.
Yes, sometimes it's quite difficult. Yes, that is why I started with books, for example, from Tom Sherrington, Dylan William, because I think they were trying to translate the scientific articles to a language. So from that common language, I could translate it to Spanish. So that goes step by step. But for example, for my PhD, I'm reading a lot of methods, which is like a obscure, I don't know, it's like reading about dark matter for me, and statistics, inference, and everything. So it's all about practicing. It's all about reading and reading. My advice is read, although you don't understand, because at the end, you will understand. At first, 20%, and then 40%, and then it will start making meaning in your mind. And at the end, you will get a glimpse of something that is really complex, but for me, it's really satisfying, because you are understanding the original science. Let's say that it's like the first step of this process that ends in my blog. So it's important to read the original sources, because sometimes we try to do our best, but we misguide, or we don't communicate the complexity of the original findings. And for me, that I am very worried about that in writing my blog. Sometimes we make simplifications to make the reader the reading easier, and I think we sometimes we lose like a kind of complexity that is important, but we can't communicate that to everyone because it will be very, very difficult. So try to read the original sources so that you don't understand a word.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, it's the nuance that gets lost, isn't it? I remember when I was reading about storytelling, I went back to the evolutionary biology, and what sort of biological historians thought about how the brain developed. And I remember reading those papers and not understanding a word, but maybe 6 months later, like you say, every morning I was reading a bit more, things started to piece together. So I think that kind of perseverance is definitely well worth it in the end. I mean,
but a key, I think that here it's key that you focus on several topics. So we can read about reading and then cognitive psychology, working memory, attention. So because the terminology and the topics are very, very complicated. So choose one, for example, cognitive load and working memory, and focus on that and keep on reading things that are related with that. So in my blog, you don't find every topic because it's impossible, because I don't know enough to understand if a paper is worth enough or not of everything related with education. It's impossible. You need to focus on something.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, normally studies in English-speaking countries, they'll say roughly 25% of teachers are engaging with material like this. Do you find that's the same in Spain? Would be quite a low number?
No, I think it's less.
Really?
Yes, I think it's less, because you have like bodies, teachers associations like the British Educational Research that has a very, very good journal, and you have Ofsted, which is publishing things, and you have evidence-based education, you have, I don't know, you have research ed, you have many foundations and trust and organizations that are pushing evidence-based education. Here in Spain, we have events. So we need to make a huge step from events to organizations, but we are still organizing events. So we have one event once a year, and it's like, wow, we have it. Yeah, but it's one event. It's not a structure. It's not an organization. It's not continuous. It's not a progress. It's like something that happens one day. We congratulate a lot because we have that event, but it's not, we need the structure and we need people that are dedicated to that 100%. Not one weekend, twice a year.
Do you think it's made more difficult by the sort of the structure? Because as far as I'm aware, you have provinces that are responsible for their own curricula and the professional development of their teachers. Am I right in thinking that?
Yes. We have a national governing body, the Ministry of Education, but each province, that we call it autonomous region, has competencies over education. So, for example, the calendar is not the same. So in the north of Spain, we have a schedule that is more similar to ours, to your schedule. So they have like 1 month of summer holidays, and then they spread their holidays all over the year. And the curriculum is more or less 60% decided by these governing bodies. Sometimes the governing bodies are the same party, the same political party as the government, so there is an alignment. But in most cases, it's not the same political party, so they try to boycott, they try to jeopardize the national educational law. So it's crazy. It's crazy. I've been 12 years teaching, and it's my third educational law. I've been through three educational law. We change everything: terminology, objectives, the subjects, the name of subjects, in 12 years. I taught 8 subjects that next year won't exist. So I'm teaching things that they don't exist anymore. I program, do the programming, the slides, activities, and everything. We have the books, but these subjects just were erased at some point. Maybe they will come back in 10 years because we switch the educational law each 6-7 years. We change. And we change terminology, but we don't have like these structures to change the way we teach. So I think that teachers are doing the same with different names. So the practice, the classroom practice is not changing. We change the names and we change the documents, but teaching practice is the same. We are doing the same with different names.
Wow. I mean, we're still getting over the curriculum change in 2014. We've changed once in my time in England. And yeah, if we changed two more times, I hate to think what the situation would be like. So, I mean, English listeners will be listening going, oh my goodness, thank goodness. I mean, and that really sets up the context for my next question. How can we take steps to become more evidence and research informed? I think as teachers and as schools, I was going to ask about systems, but it sounds like the systems is almost beyond the realm of response.
Yeah, every time that someone poses me this question, my answer is always the same. We need a structure. So that is the thing that we were talking about. We need a structure, and the structure is it's like when you are trying to organize the Olympic Games, you don't get like several motivated people, and then let's organize. No, you made a structure, and you said that we need a governing body that is responsible for, I don't know, the sports advisor from the Ministry of whatever. So that is the thing that we need. We need something that is like organized in a way that even people that is not willing to read scientific papers has access to very good sources of information. So sadly, my blog is needed. I wish that my blog doesn't exist, because there could be something from the Ministry of Education or even from the autonomous regions that is done by several people, a team, not one crazy individual like me, a team of people that is paid for that. So they could assist to congresses, they could research properly, and the communication between the scientific community at the universities and teachers is really, really, really important. So for example, here in Spain, teachers should make a PhD to become university professors. I don't know if in England it's the same. And they stay as university teachers, university professors, because they have different names. And but they have experience as teachers in secondary or primary. So why we are living in these separated boxes? Our job is related, it's intertwined. So we need to communicate these boxes. So maybe I could be a teacher, and I could become a teacher at the university for 6 hours a week, and then teach future teachers. And these teachers at the university could make some research in my classrooms. So this kind of collaboration is nascent in Spain. It's beginning to grow, but it's very, very, very little. So we need more communication between the universities and the schools. Because if they want to do real research in real settings, so in real classrooms, what do we get from that? We need to get something, maybe some good CPD, or maybe opportunities to become engaged in some research. I don't know, but there are there are quite a lot of ways we can engage with universities and the research groups, but that should not come from individual motivation, should not be individual driven, should be organized as institutions, should be something that it's taken for granted. We know that we could do that because a lot of people is doing that, not because they want it, because it's the normal way to become a good teacher. So this kind of a structure is the thing that I'm trying to, I don't know, to push here in Spain, and to demand. I am a little bit obsessed with that, because if everything is that I write an educational blog. Okay, I'm very happy. I'm glad that people find it useful, but it's one, and it's doing something that, okay, my computer is broken and everything. I don't know. WordPress is bought by Elon Musk, and goodbye blog. It's weak. It's very weak. Depends on individual willingness. And I think I believe in teams, and I believe in organization.
Do you think ministers or people in power are listening to the conversation you guys are having? Because you can see the passion that you're talking with, and there are lots of others online having the same conversations.
The problem here in Spain is that we have like a kind of conflict, a kind of war between psychology and pedagogy. And in the Ministry of Education, there are only pedagogists. But I don't reclaim pedagogy. We need pedagogy, but the problem is that they are the only ones that have a voice. And every time that we try to get cognitive psychology into teaching, they get a little bit angry, because it's like their courage. I don't know how to say it. And yeah, we need more psychology and more cognitive psychology. When I talked about education, some people are very unkind with me because I'm a biologist. And they say, how a biologist is talking about education? Education is more about philosophy. So we are changing the framework. We are shifting the paradigm. And that is being difficult here, because pedagogy was the only voice in Spanish education. And I think it's also common in the Mediterranean area, also in Italy from Montessori, and in Greece, and even in Latin America. It's the teaching is informed by pedagogy that has to do more with politics and philosophy than with cognitive psychology.
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't know about lucky, because obviously we've got our own political issues in the UK at the moment, but the ideology seems to be quite well aligned with the tenets of effective teaching. And I don't know what's going to happen when eventually the party in power does change, because I know that education policy isn't necessarily a strength of any of the other parties. Obviously that's just my personal opinion, but I could, the ideology could swing back. Some people say it swings every 30 years, regardless of what happens. But I think, we've just been reasonably lucky that we've had this period where, despite everything else being a bit of a mess, education seems to have been given the opportunity. Like, you're talking about the distillation. Our newest teachers, they have a set framework in which they need to sort of look at essentially the principles of effective teaching, and so they will be pointed to the work of the Bjorks. They'll be sent to Sweller et al, and they're coming to us a couple of steps ahead of where they might have been had they not been. So, but we will, only the future will tell us whether or not we get to enjoy that for much longer.
Yeah, it's the early career framework or something
exactly,
like that.
Yeah. So I mean, we've just done a year, and I mean, I think it's had its challenges, but the actual materials are exactly what you describe. Here are the things that you should read on entry to the profession. Here's how you get a head start on developing your practice.
Developing teachers here are reading Freire, Dewey, are reading multiple intelligences. They are reading that.
Arch, I mean, I'm just glad that they're at ground zero, sort of pushing this in the right direction.
I don't know. Maybe they should read that, but complemented with other readings. Because if you only read that, which was like 70 years ago, it's like, this is innovation. This innovation has more than 50 years. And it's very, very ideological, as you said. So the problem here is that education is something that has to do with ideology, only with ideology. So every time that we try to push cognitive psychology into education, we get problems that are not related specifically with science or teaching. we are touching something more political. So the discussion is,
You're currently researching myths in education. How might we better stop the spread of dangerous, damaging, and time-wasting myths?
If I knew that, I would be rich and famous and maybe already have a PhD. It's very difficult because we know that we have cognitive biases, and some of them are based on we try to reject information that is opposed to our views. So as education here is very ideological, it has to do with personal identity. So it's not about doing something in my classroom. It's something about beliefs. I am very interested in teaching beliefs because here it's all about beliefs. So when we criticize, for example, multiple intelligences, some people get offended because we are not talking about a scientific concept. We are talking about their personal view and their personal attitude towards himself or herself. So the discussion becomes very passionate because of that. So the first step, in my humble opinion, because I am starting to read about that, is evidence-based education gets us like a step farther away from our personal identity as teachers. So we can criticize things because we are criticizing ideas or scientific research. So we can talk about that because you are not talking about me as a teacher. We are talking about scientific idea. That's it. Okay. And then you get your classroom, and then I get my classroom, and then we do whatever we want after reading this scientific literature. So for me, the first step is dividing what has to do with scientific things and has to do with our attitudes and beliefs as individuals. So that is very, very, very difficult because our job is not like working with computers. I don't know. We work with people. So we get engaged with that people and we have strong opinions and strong beliefs about what we should do and what we shouldn't do. And sometimes these opinions have to do with our personal beliefs, I don't know, religious, political, social beliefs. Our practice is grounded in that beliefs. So it's very, very difficult to stop the spread of these dangerous myths. Take, for example, the learning styles myths that is debunked over and over again. But in the end, people are willing to think that everyone is different. And if we could do better, we can attend everyone in a classroom. If we have 40 students in a classroom and we use learning styles, so they have a good intention. They want to do good. But the problem is that it's not scientifically proven. It's scientifically unproven. So when we talk about that, and the answer is, but you don't want to make in-class teaching. You are like trying to make coffee for all. That's the problem. The problem is that we mix personal beliefs with scientific practice. And it's very, very, very difficult to change that. In Twitter, I have discussions about this with people from one side and the other side, because we're not talking about scientific papers we are talking about themselves. And we have to be very, very careful and very patient with that, because we affect the way the people see themselves. Yeah, I don't know. I wish I had a better answer.
No, like you say, if someone had the answer, they'd be a millionaire by now. They just won't stop. I mean, yeah, and you're absolutely right. It's even if we know about the biases, we still can't, account for them. Things like the sunk cost fallacy. You're still going to finish that TV series even though you know it's a waste of time. Stuff.
Yeah, this summer I read something in the newspaper that the title was evidence-based education is ridiculous. And even though I am studying these biases, I got angry because it was like a personal attack.
Yeah.
They were attacking something that is my, I have a strong belief on that. So I have to stop for a few days before replying, because if not, I will reply from my heart and my guts.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a great answer, though. It's about how do we separate the personal from the professional, and I don't think there is an answer, but we can just try bit by bit, like you say. Sometimes just leaving things and responding to them when you've got time. You know, hopefully, if teachers are coming in earlier and getting sort of the more scientifically rigorous access to more scientifically rigorous materials at the start of their journey, then maybe they won't form those sort of misinterpretations or so I don't know. I think you're spot on.
Hopefully.
Your blog makes literature and research published in English available to Spanish-speaking audiences. Whose work should we be translating from Spanish to English, and why?
Okay, I think that there is one guy, Hector Ruiz, who's publishing, and he has a really good book, How We Learn, Como Aprendemos, How We Learn, and it's like the Bible. We said it's like the Bible because it has everything. It talks about motivation, cognitive load, everything. It's a very, very good summary of research about education. And we have also very good researches about motivation here in Spain. In my blog, I have a video with an interview with Jesus Alonso Tapia, which talks about the motivational climate in the classroom. And I think it's very interesting. And the other researchers that I know that they are very, very, really good, they are writing science in English. So you can access the papers like Marta Ferrero, Ernesto Panadero, they are writing in English. So you can access their work. Educational publishers in Spain are mainly textbooks publishers. So we now have, for example, John Catt Education here. And so we don't have as many educational books as you have. I tried like 2 years ago to translate officially via a publisher some books from England, but publishers didn't think that we have the market here to do that. Yeah, that's data. So they made some marketing and economical calculations, and they thought that it's not worth it.
Wow. I mean, Hector Ruiz, I read up, I may have misunderstood quite a bit of it, but it seemed a really balanced approach, because there was a lot of talk about emotions that I wasn't expecting to be there later in the book. So I think he's done a really good job of finding, you're talking about these different ideologies. He's got lots of the cold hard science, but actually, as far as I can tell, he takes into consideration a lot of the external factors as well. Am I reading that right?
Yeah, and there's also one that I want to mention, that is Jesus Alonso, that has written about the history of neuroscience, and it's very good. I really like it.
Excellent.
And I'm not saying any of my books, because my books are not good enough to be in that list.
No, I mean, I would disagree. I was waiting for you to say it. I mean, how can people access your books? I mean, is it going to be up to me to ask permission to translate them into English and share them as blogs, or can they purchase them online?
Yeah, I don't know.
Like I say, I think it sounds like, with a greater increase attention on sort of research informed practice, that market builds itself. I think publishers can be quite cutthroat, so hopefully that changes, because I mean, I've seen lots of sort of great books. Was it The school isn't a park of attractions. It's the best name for a book in Spanish I've read. In La escuela no es un parque de
Bah,
atracciones.
sí.
I thought that is the best name for a book.
Yeah, but if you I love Gregorio Luri, which is the author. I'm not always agree with that with him, but the problem is that if you read that book, it's not like a scientifically driven book. It's more like an essay. Like my first book is an essay. It's not scientific. So we need something more than that. I love to read different kind of books, educational books that are like, this is my opinion and I have good arguments. Okay, for me it's good. But as we were talking earlier, we need data. So how many references? Yeah, that's the question for me. So yeah, my first book is an essay. It's me talking about education from my point of view. Okay, but my second book it's about formative assessment from a scientific point of view. So they are different, and it's very important to understand this difference because when we read something, we need to know if we are reading opinions or arguments, philosophical, let's say, or we are reading scientific evidence that could be put it into practice in our classrooms. And it's totally different. We need to read opinions and arguments, but we need to distinguish between these kind of books. And sometimes they are very well mixed because in Spain we have lots of books about neuroeducation, but I read them and they are like, but they don't have references. They don't have, they don't cite anything. So if you don't have citations, this is not neuroscience. This is your opinion about how the brain works. It's not the same. Okay, it's okay, but we need to know the difference.
Yeah, I mean the prefix neuro is normally a red flag whenever I'm reading stuff. It's normally there to like you say, to dress it up as science, but it's not quite. I mean, John Cat, I know they translated Craig Barton's first book, How, which I taught maths into Spanish. So maybe John Cat, yeah, there's a Spanish version.
Really glad to hear that.
So maybe I'll have a word with them and see if they can translate more.
Yeah, there is Aptus, which is an organization from Chile, which is translating some books into Spanish. But in Spain, it's only a digital platform, so we don't have it in paper, and people prefer paper in general to highlight.
I mean, I tried many times to move towards tablet-based reading, but nothing beats a book. I mean, we discussed this a little bit at the start. What advice do you have for those keen to read but are struggling to overcome the barriers, such as dense writing styles and long, drawn-out formats? My advice is normally to skip the methodology because you can take it or leave it.
Yes. Yeah, start with books that are like the summary of the research. You have Doug Limov's, right, or David Dido. It's right. It's a great piece of summarizing scientific research. And although Dido is in the borderline between argument and scientific research sometimes, so you need to read it carefully. But I think it's for me it's one of the best authors. And then you can start from that, Tom Sherrington and Dylan William, and then take some references from that books, the references that you find more attractive from the title, and they are related with the things that you're doing in class, in your classroom, and then start from that. In my blog, this is marketing, advertisement. In my blog, I have a section that is called resources, recursos, and you click on that, and you have a selection of original papers from Zimmerman talking about motivation, like the classics, the principles of Rosenstein, and for example, principles of Rosenstein is something that it's a scientific paper, but not at all. So you can start from that. There are quite a bit scientific references, but you can read that. It's written thinking in teachers. So start from that, and then, but don't stop there. Keep on reading more and more complex things, because it's worth it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, how often do you read a day? I mean, not when you're not studying for a PhD. How often? Maybe 5-10 minutes or longer?
No, longer. I try to read longer. Yes. Yeah. I try to read like some novel once in a month or once in 2 months, but usually I read about education. Yes, and I try to read books. For example, when I'm after lunch, we take the siesta, the famous siesta, this nap. I read books that are more informative, like the ones that we talked about now. And then in the evening, or when I have like 20 minutes of focused work, I read papers. For me, it's important. Try not to read papers when you are taking care of your children, for example. You can read that. You need time and focus time for a long period, for 20 minutes. And you read a paper in 20 minutes when you're focused. But if you are cooking, for example, or you are, I don't know, taking care of your children, and you are doing anything else, you can have a book that is easily written, and you read it like a novel, and that's it.
Yeah. I can't imagine trying to do anything with my kids around. It's them and nothing else. So you're spend attention when it's needed properly. Yeah, it makes a whole lot of sense.
Yeah, with my children, they read Harry Potter, for example, and I'm reading Doug Limov.
Yeah, I mean, that's the way to do it.
It's a different kind of magic.
In your own work, you've discussed how complex problems require complex solutions, and I think many spend a lot of time trying to simplify the solutions provided for teachers, and that's come across the thread of our discussion today. Is this, in your view, misguided, and why might that be the case?
It is misguided if you are trying to confuse people to think that the simplicity is everything. So the complexity is not there. So I have the magical solution for your problems, like multiple intelligences, for example. Now, everyone will be better off if we teach multiple intelligences. But do you know something that is the best for everyone? So simplifications are dangerous when they avoid us to think. So could be good if, for example, Doug Limov's, it's like the systematicity. I don't know how to say it. We take what the best teachers do, and they write a book trying to summarize the best practices of the best teachers. Okay, we simplify things, and it's good. It's like a recipe book, and then you take the things that you want. For me, that's perfect. But the problem is when these recipes are trying to simplify education as a whole. So we avoid thinking. That's a problem. And this is very, very common, I think, because these views, like my views and the other views, like opposites, are based on simplifications. So in teaching, it's very common. You have like Guy Claxton, I think Guy Claxton has a book that I really dislike because it's based on this simplification about the others and my people. My people is trying to make education better, and these other people is trying to do something for. It's not like this. Everyone is trying to make education better, but if you present that, many people will be. It's seductive, because it's like the enemies. These are the enemies, the bad people. people that are trying to make education worse. That is misguided. That is not the theme of my first book is try to avoid this kind of thinking that it's easy, it's very easy, it's comfortable. So our brains like easy, uncomfortable thoughts. So your brain is will be stuck by these thinkings, by these thoughts about others and my people that are the good ones, and the others that are the bad people that disagree with me. So yeah, every educational book that is trying that you stop thinking, and it gets like a picture, a simplified picture for me. Don't stop thinking.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm totally with you. That's why thinking deeply is my
yeah, I love your you have to when we read something that is like putting a mirror on us and we see our practice in that mirror, that is evidence-based education in its purest form. It's not like a recipe, it's a mirror, and you have a contrast, and it's good, or we can change that and that and that.
Yeah, that's very kind of you to say. Thank you. Yeah, I think thinking is the most important thing we can do. And what I try to do in my schools is try and make space. So get rid of all the unnecessary workload so that the time I spend with my teachers is time spent thinking. You can't tell someone how to use variation theory. You can say, here are some general principles, here's how I've done it, but you've got to think about how the questions behave with each other and stuff like that. So yeah, I'm totally with you on that one.
The problem with, for example, Dagnemov's work that I love is taking it as a checklist. I should do that and that and that and that, and then you put tick box, but that's not the case.
Yeah. Oh, we love tick boxes in education. We love lists that we can just yeah, it's probably why people get into teaching. They love to-do lists. So obviously you've mentioned some pretty prevalent examples. Are there any other examples of oversimplifications which our beginning teachers should try to avoid?
People learn best when they are then they are talking their preferred learning styles. We only use 10% of our brain. There are general skills like creativity or problem-solving skills. That is something that I love, because we need to teach creativity. Okay, let's define creativity. First problem, because we don't have a definition of creativity. No, let's focus on some people that are like inspirations, like Einstein, that is used for almost everything in education. Okay, but he was creative in one way, but not very creative in others. If you read about Mileva Maric, his wife, that's not very creative. Okay, so where do we start? Creativity is domain specific. Problem solving skills are domain specific. And I have terrible difficulties in translating domain specific to Spanish, so I'm very happy to be talking in English only in this moment. Because domain specific means that we can be creative in biology, for example, but very poor creativity in maths, for example. But there are people that is saying, and that is a simplification, that we should teach creativity in general. So they should paint, for example, in Spanish. In Spain, we have in Spanish school, we have something that is called atelier, and it's like an art classroom in which they explore things, and by exploring things and textures and colors, they think that children will become more creative. To be creative in biology, I need to teach them more biology and evolution, for example. So playing with sound and with colors and with lights, it's okay with toddlers, with children 4 years old, but take my students 15 years old, to be creative, they need knowledge. And that's as simple as that. So a very dangerous simplification is the existence of general skills that can be taught like that. So, okay, let's teach creativity. Let's teach high order thinking. High order thinking has many layers of foundation that we need to build layer by layer. It's difficult. That's why we have schools, and we now have like one artist teaching creativity to everyone. So that is a very dangerous simplification. And the other one is like the teachers, like CPD is based on some kind of ideology that should top down. It should go top down. So these people is saying that it's good to do this, and then we as teachers receive like the meteorite, and okay, I need to do cooperative learning. I need to do I don't know, problem solving. I need to do but no, the CPD should be bottom up. We have some problems, some struggles that we need to think about that, read about that, and as a team, we get solutions that are not easy. They are step-by-step solutions to that problems, and then we think about more challenging things or text to read, and then we build on that. And that is a very common simplification.
Yeah, I mean, that's brilliant. It's like I tell you, I don't know, a chart of all the big simplifications. You know, I remember the first time I read about domain-specific knowledge and the role that knowledge played in creativity. It was you know, scales from eyes, like, oh my goodness, you know, because
Yeah.
when you're in school, you don't know this stuff. You just have your experience of school, and you're not analyzing how you think. But then when you look at it and you realize that actually you were very creative in the areas where you already knew lots of stuff about it, it just makes so much.
Yeah, here in Spain we have a TV program that it's called This Is Art that I love. It's about art, and it's but the message is that everyone could love art just by intuition, but the own program has a lot of content. So it's saying, yeah, everyone loves art and everyone can, but I will teach you how to look at this painting. I will teach you how to listen to that music so you appreciate it. Yeah. So the implicit message, it's yeah, I'm saying that everyone can love art, but at the same time, in practice, we need knowledge to appreciate why this painting is so good, why this music is so good. So the implicit message is it's perfect. We need to know something about art, how this guy was painting that, which brushes they use, or which a harmony, and then we appreciate in a very different, in a very complex way. We appreciate in a different kind of enjoyment art.
I mean, it's been fantastic talking to you today, because you know, a chance to think about all the things that we, like you said, we've been thinking about for the last decade or so, but really putting them back into fresh focus. And hopefully this can be helpful for your efforts to sort of support people in Spain. But I know it'll definitely be really helpful for people in England as well when they're considering how they approach the sort of this academic year. And what time frame are you working to with your PhD? Have you got long left, or are you still at the start?
No, it's 5 years long. That could be up to 7. And I am starting my second.
Oh, well, I'm looking forward to reading.
I've done things before starting officially the PhD, but yes, I have 1 year, and it's based on improving ideas about teaching and learning in Spanish teachers. So we are exploring some ideas, scientifically unproven ideas, and then we will try to test some strategies to challenge those unproven ideas, and to see if we can learn something about belief change and practice change. So it's fascinating for me. I love the theme, and it's huge because we have located like more than 100 scientifically unproven ideas that are very common, and we need to select that, because if not, the questionnaire will be like 2 days long, and we need to do it 15 minutes long.
That's brilliant. Yeah, I can't wait to read that when it's out. So what'll that be, a 2027-ish, maybe 2029? Looking forward to it. No, but it's been brilliant. Thank you very much for joining me. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you for this opportunity, and I hope that they understand my Spanish accent.
No,
sorry for that.
Absolutely. I mean, it's certainly much better than if I were trying to speak in Spanish the whole way through this.